The White House imposes new sanctions against Iran as punishment for its recent ballistic missile test and its overall bad behavior in the region. The penalties targeting 13 people, a dozen companies.
They're not behaving.
We'll take up President Trump's response to Iran with Ambassador John Bolton. Also tonight, President Trump saving more taxpayer money. The president succeeded in getting the F-35 jet fighter cost below $100 million per plane.
Another great deal was reached with Lockheed Martin for the purchase of a new lot of F-35s, another big win.
We'll discuss the Trump economy with two former presidential candidates, Steve Forbes and Governor Mike Huckabee. How's he doing? And violent protests against free speech erupting at another liberal college campus. Police arresting 11 people who rioted over a planned speech by conservative actor and Vice Media co-founder Gavin McInnes. We take up here tonight what has become a national disgrace, our colleges and universities where there is no such thing as free speech if you are a conservative. Good evening, everybody. The Trump administration today imposing new economic sanctions against 13 Iranian citizens and 12 companies, freezing any property or money they may have under U.S. jurisdiction. This comes in response to the Islamic Republic's recent ballistic missile test that the White House says violates a UN Security Council resolution. National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn issued a statement on the new sanctions saying this, quote, "The international community has been too tolerant of Iran's bad behavior. The days of turning a blind eye to Iran's hostile and belligerent actions toward the United States and the world community are over." President Trump also weighed in and released this statement on Twitter. Iran is playing with fire. They don't appreciate how kind President Obama was to them. Not me. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer today responded to a question about whether Mr. Trump would consider taking military action against Iran.
The president's been very clear. He doesn't take options off the table, but he understands the impact of something like that. The sanctions today, I think, are going to be very, very strong and impactful. And I hope that Iran realizes that after the provocative measures that they've taken, that they understand that this president, this administration is not going to sit back, take it lightly.
And the Navy has deployed the guided missile destroyer USS Cole. It's patrolling off the coast of Yemen in the wake of increasing tensions with Iran. It's, of course, symbolic that the USS Cole was deployed to patrol the waters off Yemen. It was attacked by al-Qaeda suicide bombers in the port of Aden in 2000, killing 17 of its sailors. President Trump today also addressed today's terrorist attack in Paris. French soldiers shot and critically wounded a man who shouted Allahu Akbar as he attacked them with 2 machetes at the Louvre. Trump reminded the United States not to forget about terrorism. The president tweeted this: "A new radical Islamic terrorist has just attacked in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Tourists were locked down. France on edge again. Get smart, U.S." Our first guest tonight is here to talk about the Iranian provocations and the Trump administration focus on radical Islamist terror. Joining us tonight, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations American Enterprise Institute Senior Fellow, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, great to have you here. These sanctions against Iran, these seem like a restrained, measured response on the part of the administration. Do you think there is any chance the Iranians will pay attention?
No, look, I favor the sanctions, but nobody should have any illusion that they'll do the slightest to slow down either Iran's ballistic missile program or its nuclear program. When you name specific individuals and companies, simply new companies, new false fronts appear. Freezing assets in the United States, good God, if the Iranians have learned anything, once Obama unfroze all their assets, they're not going to leave anything here to freeze. What's most significant, I think, are the statements made by President Trump, National Security Advisor Flynn, Flynn yesterday saying this puts Iran on notice. Yeah. And I think what it puts them on notice about is that the Obama nuclear deal is about a heartbeat away from being ended. And the president himself saying he's not taking any options off the table. For the first time in 8 years, there's now a credible threat of military force. If Donald Trump's shown anything in the past 2 weeks, it's his credibility. And if there's the slightest chance that Iran will come to its senses, the credible threat of military force is the one thing that can focus their attention.
You know, it's interesting to watch this president operate because he has done what he said he would do, what he promised he would do in the campaign, and nearly all of it on domestic policy, on domestic issues. But as you move toward foreign policy, in this instance, for example, the Iranians have to be asking themselves, my God, he is doing what he said he would do. How do we put that into our calculus now? Because his predecessor was one of the most ambiguous and ambivalent figures in White House history.
Yeah, look, this is the end of 8 years where America's adversaries could size up the mark in the White House and take advantage of him. I think they're uncertain what Trump will do, and that's all to the good. As I say, I think there's very little in the economic sphere that will stop the Ayatollahs from the objective. Look, they've been pursuing for over 35 years to get deliverable nuclear weapons. And let's be clear, the ballistic missile test that prompted these sanctions was reported by the Pentagon to have failed when the re-entry vehicle failed. You don't need re-entry vehicles for weather or communication satellites. They're supposed to stay up there. Right. The re-entry vehicle is for the nuclear weapon. So there's no doubt what this ballistic missile program is all about, and we're on to them.
Yeah. And I want to turn to two other quick things very quickly, because the level of disrespect, insult that is rising in the national liberal media. We know that all of the owners of the national liberal media, they've had to receive their corporate orders. Because otherwise they would not be taking place. The pages of newspapers, whether it is the Washington Post, the New York Times, websites, whatever the media outlet. But now Der Spiegel and the Village offering up these headlines. There is Donald Trump on the cover of Der Spiegel with Lady Liberty's head in his right hand and a machete in the other. The Village saying, why not? This is a level of repugnance that it was not even, you couldn't have contemplated, you couldn't have conjured under President Obama or any preceding president. What in the world are we to do?
Well, look, it's out in the open now. That's the best thing. Honestly, they can't say they're unbiased anymore with these kinds of covers.
Yeah, we move by bias quite convincingly.
Yeah, the Der Spiegel cover, you know, it's a cruel irony that on the very day that cover comes out in France, police and military at the Louvre, one of the West's most important museums, have had to defend innocent civilians against a guy shouting Allahu Akbar and wielding a knife. So, you know, if that's where the German media are going to focus their attention, this is just another problem for their government. And I think I think the people are going to speak in Germany as they did in this country, and the elite may not like it. But actually, you know, the people want their government to keep them safe from terrorist attack. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And the thing that's really incredible is we've had this president in office 2 weeks and look at everything that he has accomplished. I want to turn to the United Nations very quickly, as this president has already been admonishing and indeed warning the United Nations about the relationship with the United States. Turns out in his last year in office, President Obama showered $9.2 billion on the United Nations. What in the world was he thinking?
Well, this is something I thought actually would be more typical of his first 8 years in office, but it just took the last one. I think the Trump administration should look for every possible way to rescind this money, if that's at all doable. And I think this is the sort of action that should prompt the kind of review overall of how the U.S. Spends money in the UN system. As I've said before, I'd move away from assessed contributions. I'd only pay for what we want and insist we get what we pay for. If you need any more evidence why that's necessary, Barack Obama just gave it to us as he went out the door.
And our president, President Trump, is demonstrating what respect for the taxpayers' money means in negotiating a new deal with Lockheed Martin on the F-35 jet fighters. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Great to have you with us, John Bolton. We're coming right back. There is a lot more to cover, and much of it is good news, all about the economy. Things are getting better, folks. It's okay to smile. We'll be right back. President Trump promising more economic growth and prosperity for business and all Americans.
227,000 jobs. Great spirit in the country right now. So we're very happy about that. I think that it's going to continue big league. We're bringing back jobs. We're bringing down your taxes.
President Trump making it clear America First is not just a slogan. The Five's Kimberly Guilfoyle joins me here next. We'll assess the president's first 2 weeks in office. Yes, 2 weeks as of today. Days ago, violent riots at UC Berkeley. Last night, New York University, 11 people arrested during a protest against the co-founder of Vice Media, Gavin McInnes. McInnes holding a seminar for the university's college Republicans. He says he was pepper sprayed by someone in the crowd. Charges range from disorderly conduct, criminal mischief, resisting arrest, and at least one drug possession charge. Joining us tonight, co-host of The Five, Kimberly Guilfoyle. And Kimberly, great to have you here.
Great to be here with you.
As an attorney, this has to be even more shocking to you that these institutions of higher learning, academia, free speech is not even considered relevant to an education now. These universities just saying, the hell with it. If you're a conservative, you've got no rights.
Yeah, they behave like fascist regimes, right, where they don't allow any other thought, any independent thinking. They don't want to open their minds. The higher the learning in academia, the dumber down they get, it seems, in terms of not allowing people to come forward and talk about the issues, and maybe somebody might learn something. I mean, can you imagine if the situation were reversed? And it's really appalling to me. And I went to UC Davis, okay, which is not behaving well these days either. Right. It's right up there with Berkeley for nonsense. Now you see this in New York, but it's shameful. And you would think that the professors and administrators in these universities would actually give a damn, that they would actually want someone to be able to open their mind and respect the First Amendment, respect freedom of speech, and encourage students there to be able to participate. And at Berkeley, you know, that was sold out. It was a sold-out event, and then look what happened with the rioting.
One arrest. And that was made by the campus police. A different result in New York. I'm pleased to say at least there were 11 arrests. There were consequences for that conduct. Oregon, however, taking an entirely different direction. The governor of Oregon has decided that immigrant sanctuary status would be just perfect for the state of Oregon, even as the president is talking about ending all sanctuary, irrespective of the jurisdiction, whether a city, a county, or a state.
Yeah, and it's just really this kind of, you know, they don't have any respect whatsoever for the federal law, let alone for the presidency. And they're going to try and do it on it. We'll see how well you can do it on your own without federal funding. Let's see how that works out for all of you. And they can't just pick and choose arbitrarily what laws they're going to abide by. That's not how it works.
It seems in this there is some urgency, though, for the Trump administration to act, because as they move, forward here, they can't just, as it were, draw one of those famous red lines. There have to be consequences.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, set an example immediately with one of these wayward states that's very mouthy and wants to let in illegals and let people commit crimes and not abide by the extreme vetting, which is going to make all of us safer from a national security perspective. And it's shameful to me that they are using politics to try to go against public safety and totally disregarding their obligation to make sure that everybody there in those communities has a safe place to be. I mean, it's sad to me, and he needs to send an example, and I think that he will.
2 weeks he's been president of the United States.
Busy.
It has been incredible. In 2 weeks, what he has done, even the White House press corps, many of them are begging for mercy right now. They're thrilled that he's gone to the winter White House down to Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. They just need a breather.
They need a breather. I mean, it's been, I'm almost terrified to go to sleep. I don't want to miss anything. Believe me, you know, I'm staying here tonight till late in case there's any big breaking news and need to throw on an hour.
Well, it's really true. And I think there is that view. Certainly everyone in our business, it can't wait to get up in the morning. But I think that's true of most Americans. I mean, you don't know what is going to happen because this president is making much happen.
We saw how hard he worked when he campaigned.
Right.
He was relentless while, like, you know, Hillary Clinton was taking naps in a Scooby-Dooby van. And look where that got her, eating Scooby snacks. So now what he's actually doing is honoring the promises that he took very seriously, that he made to the American people, the movement that created across this country to not forget the working class men and women and those in poverty, to try to bring them back into the fold. He takes that obligation and that promise very seriously. And people should give him credit to say, look, he's doing what he said he would, and he's doing it in rapid fire. You
know, the only ones who I believe are not giving him credit, of course, are the national left-wing media and their corporate masters. Other than
the lamos?
I beg your pardon?
The lamos? Yeah, the lamos.
I like that. We'll add that to DIM.
It's a technical term.
You got it. Kimberly Guilfoyle, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Did I mention it was Oregon that was moving towards sanctuary status?
Yes.
To all my friends out in Oregon, be sure to vote in our poll tonight. Are you more or less optimistic about the future after 2 weeks of the Trump presidency? We'd like to hear how his presidency has so far moved you. I know it's only been 2 weeks, but what a 2 weeks. Cast your vote at Lou Dobbs on Twitter. And follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs tonight. Breaking news now. The Mexican government reporting a surge in murders. Official statistics show Mexico with almost 21,000 murders last year. That's a 22% increase over 2015. By comparison, 15,000, almost 16,000 people were murdered in this country. The latest year available is 2015. And of course, this is a country 3 times the size of Mexico. On Wall Street, a record-breaking day for stocks. The Dow posting its biggest gain since December, up 187 points today. The S&P up 17, the Nasdaq up 31 points. I just, if I may point something out, because to all of my friends in the business press and business media who have been talking about rising anxiety about Trump policies, about the market reacting and investors reacting to some questions about nominations or whatever, I would like to point out that the Dow back above 20,000, and yes, $2.2 trillion in value has been added to U.S. exchanges in 2 weeks. That's right. Since we're coming right back. We'll have much more. Stocks today posted, well, a terrific result, and the strong jobs report helping as well. The economy adding 227,000 jobs in January. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
We expect to be cutting a lot out of Dodd-Frank because, frankly, I have so many people, friends of mine, that have nice businesses. They can't borrow money. They just can't get any money because the banks just won't let them borrow because of the rules and regulations in Dodd-Frank. So we'll be talking about that, Jim, in terms of the banking industry.
A few thoughts now on a country that is truly undergoing what someone once called a fundamental transformation. And this transformation started the day President Trump was elected. President Trump is the change agent that he assured us all that he would be in the campaign. And he brings to the presidency indefatigable commitment to make America great again. And not even the posh lords and masters of the left-wing media and their minions can suppress his boundless energy. And we have even more good news on the economy today. A strong jobs report for last month, and President Trump is building on that. President Trump today signed an executive order to begin rolling back Dodd-Frank, a move that the White House National Economic Council director hailed as a boost to business.
The biggest hindrance to growth and the biggest hindrance to job creation is regulation in this country. We have to get the United States banking system working again. We need to make capital available for small and medium-sized businesses and for entrepreneurs.
And he couldn't be more correct. The president also taking his pro-jobs, pro-growth message to business leaders, big business leaders. They met today at the White House with top executives from some of the world's biggest companies. And during his 2 incredibly fast, action-packed weeks in office, can you believe it? It's only been 2 weeks. President Trump has already met with more than 50 business leaders. Yet Silicon Valley still foolishly working against the man who is working so hard to better life for all Americans. Uber CEO announced in something of a peak he is quitting the president's Strategic and Policy Forum ahead of the meeting today. Poor thing, apparently overburdened by a president who's the most successful disruptor in more than 3 decades. I don't know about you, but I think I'm over Uber. Amazon, Microsoft, Expedia, all supporting a lawsuit brought by Washington State's Attorney General over Mr. Trump's extreme vetting order. Apple weighing, taking legal action of its own. And Google co-founder Sergey Brin even joking about impeaching the president during a company rally opposing his executive order. Think about where we are. Companies having meetings about how to oppose presidential orders. Well, Brin wasn't funny, but at least he wasn't being serious in calling for impeachment. Of course, the technology industry donated 60 times as much money to Hillary Clinton than President Trump. And now they're continuing to fight him every petty step of their way. And they will do so until they're overwhelmed by the president's success and by the history that he is already making. But it is a history that he is making for all Americans, not just for the elites, which must bother and even motivate the most elite of the elites, those in Silicon Valley. And that's just a bonus under this president. What fun. Now the quotation of the evening, this one from former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said, "Happiness lies in the joy of achievement and the thrill of creative effort." I'm just guessing, but I think President Trump must be pretty happy about right now. We're coming right back. The president today meeting with business leaders with one objective: jobs, jobs, and more jobs in America.
Looking forward in a little while, in the upcoming few moments, to discuss all of the things that you think we can do to bring back our jobs, to get taxes even lower than we're going to be cutting them.
We're joined next by the Dean of Strategists, Republican strategist Ed Rollins, and the Weekly Standard's Fred Barnes. Lockheed Martin and the White House announcing a new F-35 fighter jet contract that cuts $728 million out of the gross price. The $8.2 billion contract also setting the stage for adding 1,800 jobs in Fort Worth, Texas. Lockheed say that the savings represent a reduction of nearly 8% in the original price for the fighter jet over the last contract. So good on you, Mr. President. And joining me tonight, the executive editor at the Weekly Standard, Fred Barnes, veteran of 10 presidential campaigns, Republican strategist Ed Rollins. Were you laughing at 10 presidential campaigns? Is that what you were? Come on, Fred.
It just made me feel tired, but Ed's probably been involved in more of them than I have, and I say that as a compliment.
Thank you. They haven't all been winning, but we've all tried in all of them.
You had Reagan. That's all you need.
Reagan helped Trump this time, so
that's right. I mean, he set the stage for it. Mm-hmm. Let's turn to this contract. I mean, we're talking about significant money here. 7.5% in point of fact on the reduction in the price, Fred. I mean, this is impressive. It wouldn't have happened if the president had not engaged directly with the CEOs of Lockheed Martin and Boeing and other companies to make it happen.
Of course, that's right. And of course, Lockheed and the Pentagon both say, oh, we were going to do this anyway. Of course they weren't. They weren't going to do it. It's like those NATO countries, you know, that are now spending more money on their military as they were supposed to do. Nothing to do with Trump. He had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you've never been able to get more than 5 of those NATO countries to come up with 2% of their budgets, and suddenly everybody is in. What do you think, Ed?
Well, I think this is extraordinary. We're going to have a tremendous buildup on our defense as we need it. It's been a long time since we rebuilt in the 80s. And this is a first giant step forward, and I think to our men and women who basically fight these battles and protect us, it's very, very important that we get the very best equipment at the cheapest price. he has set a tone now for all of defense spending in the near future that people are going to be very careful of what they're trying to overcost, and I think it's a great move forward.
Well, General Mattis, the new defense secretary, is also setting quite a tone, Fred, in Asia, saying very clearly to Kim Jong-un that that it is now adult supervision time, and there will be no more nonsense from him without effectively a truly destructive response. Your thoughts on what the general said and how it'll be received both in North Korea, China, and Japan?
Well, it'll be received unfavorably, but it will have an impact. In the same way that Trump's decision to impose some new sanctions against the Iranians, that will have impact too. He shows that he will respond to all these things, these disruptive acts by rogue countries, and it will have an effect. Do you think the Iranians know the difference between Trump and President Obama? I think they just learned about that today.
I think they're getting a strong sense of it, don't you? South Korea and Japan have got to be thrilled.
South Korea and Japan have both been great allies, and I think that basically, as General Mathis said, we're there with you shoulder to shoulder. Very important message that the president sent by putting the USS Cole, one of our great ships that was attacked and 17 men were killed. He's put it back right there in the strait where they were attacked. And the message is, don't mess with us.
Off the coast of Yemen, bringing with it replete with 90 guided missiles and cruise missiles as well. This is quite a step. And it's also significant because they're such a symbolic, as you suggest, such a symbolic. I think the Navy chose the Cole carefully and for that precise reason. If there are going to be shots fired, it's going to come from the Cole.
Well, the commander-in-chief executed the order, and that's the good thing.
Absolutely. Let's turn to Iran and serving notice on Iran, Fred, and now moving the Cole in, as Ed says. This is certainly not very Obama-like on the part of this administration. Do you think that escapes the Iranians, though, to get to that particular point?
It sure doesn't, and if they didn't get it yesterday from the White House announcement, they got it this morning from the tweet by Donald Trump, in which he said, you all had a very easy time with President Obama, and he didn't go after you about any of these violations of UN resolutions and so on. Then he said, but not me, with an exclamation point afterward. And look, they're going to get that message. I mean, Trump, everything they do that they shouldn't be doing, he's going to respond to noisily. And the Iranians, I think, learned that today.
Well, the great thing is President Obama, for 8 years, thought the Iranians, who for 35 years have been our enemy, and basically have never behaved themselves ever since they invaded and captured our hostages back in the 70s. President Trump has given them a warning, and it's more than a warning. This is a line drawn in the sand that basically, you go across it, you're going to pay a heavy price.
Ed, thank you very much, Fred. Thank you. Appreciate it, gentlemen. The White House begins dismantling the Dodd-Frank law, saying it's hurting American consumers and banks.
The Dodd-Frank Act is a disastrous policy that's hindering our markets, reducing the availability of credit, and crippling our economy's ability to grow and create jobs.
Former presidential candidate Steve Forbes joins me and weighs in on the administration's latest actions. What does he think about Dodd-Frank and deregulation? We'll find out here next. Stay with us. President Trump today signing executive orders aimed at scaling back financial regulations. The first order saw Trump making good on his campaign promise to review Dodd-Frank Wall Street reforms, the president delaying a regulation that would have required financial advisors to act in the so-called best interest of their clients as opposed to choosing investments that would result in higher commissions for themselves, the fiduciary rule. Joining me now, Forbes media chairman, editor-in-chief, Steve Forbes. Steve, great to have you here.
Good to be here.
How's your shoulder?
Chugging along. We'll know next week whether I have to have surgery.
Well, we're pulling for you. And
thank you. And I like to think it was fighting regulations and liberals and all that kind of thing.
Well, I'm sure that contributed. I want to turn to Frank now. Overall, your view on Dodd-Frank and repealing as much of it as possible.
Well, Dodd-Frank has been an utter disaster. And the true story is, if we had Dodd-Frank before the financial crisis, we still would have had the financial crisis. All it has done is raise a huge cost, hurt small businesses' ability to get lending, hurt smaller banks. So not much to like about it. Plus, they have this Consumer Protection Agency, which is accountable to no one. The president should start looking at that one, that should get rid of it. And it's, again, raising costs and denying access to credit to people who need it.
Yeah, as you mentioned, small banks, particularly $10 billion smaller, those banks moving a lot of money, hopefully, to small business owners and driving the economy. One of the things we're struggling against, as you well know, in this economy right now, is creating greater velocity for the money that we are moving into the system. We also have $4.5 trillion in overhang on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. I mean, we have some, what do they call it on Wall Street, headwinds?
Well, I think now we're starting to get some tailwinds. People know that regulations, this is a serious deregulator in the White House, and that's a good thing. Instead of waking up each morning and worrying what they're going to hit me with next, what are they going to relieve me of next?
Yeah, it is an entirely different perspective, and I wanted, and again, we're talking about $2.2 trillion since November 8th that have been added to the market cap of U.S. stocks. $2.2 trillion.
And it would be 4.4 if we move fast, as I think the president wants to do, on a real big tax cut.
Right.
And no 20% national sales
tax. What's wrong with your buddy Paul Ryan? Why isn't the speaker moving it?
I don't know. The EPA, if it wants to do something useful, would examine the water and air in Washington, why people who go there suddenly behave in very strange ways after a few
Does it have
years.
anything to do with K Street and all those lobbyists that make up so much of the swamp that our president now wants to drain, do you suppose?
And also crazy ideas that raising taxes helps cut taxes.
What do you think of this Ryan
Alice in
idea? 20% tax on imports here.
And subsidies for exports. You know, you talk about Iran. Boeing sells $16 billion of aircraft to Iran. That's $16 billion tax-free, and American consumers pay more.
Yeah.
I don't get that arithmetic.
Well, I don't get the arithmetic. I don't get the idea that Paul Ryan, why he is so committed to that, and apparently is selling hard to the White House on the idea.
Selling hard. He had dinner last night, I think, with Jared Kushner, trying to get that door open.
Oh,
and a lot of the Republicans are supporting this, not just Ryan.
Yeah, well, those Republicans need to, and I hope whatever they're doing, remember the idea of taxing the American people before you cut taxes is a bad organization, a priority, and it is absolutely foolhardy. I don't know if you join me in this, absolutely foolhardy to do.
Well, foolhardy is a polite word on a family channel.
Well, I
use that.
But I'm always so elegant in my language. I would never use vulgar, profane terms to describe anything to do with taxes and politics.
But the great tax cutters of the past, like Reagan and Kennedy, never tied tax cuts to on the spending side, knowing that would be a death knell. Get the tax cuts in. You know, Trump is going to focus on spending as well. Get the tax cuts in. And the other thing they don't realize is when you make a tax cut, it's not just now, but investments take 2, 3, 4 years to bear fruit. Yeah. That doesn't happen overnight. So why do they think the revenue is going to come in overnight?
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about President Trump. He's a businessman. He understands investment and
announcing a building doesn't build the building. It takes time.
I like that. There isn't an industry you don't know, Cole. Steve, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lou.
Steve Forbes. Well, up next, the Patriots and the Falcons. This is their weekend. President Trump, however, says politics is a much bigger draw.
Amazingly, it's never happened before that politics has become a much bigger subject than the Super Bowl. This is usually Super Bowl territory, and now they're saying that the politics is more interesting to people. So that's good.
Does Governor Mike Huckabee agree? We'll ask him next. Stay with us as we examine which is the bigger draw, the Super Bowl or perhaps the Florida White House. We'll ask him next. Breaking news now, a federal judge in Seattle has granted a nationwide temporary restraining order that blocks President Trump's recent executive action that bars nationals from 7 countries from entering the United States. Attorney General Bob Ferguson of the state of Washington, the order represents a major challenge to the Trump administration, expected immediately to appeal. The judge in that case declining to stay the order, suggesting that travel restrictions nationwide could be lifted immediately. Well, joining me now, former Republican presidential candidate, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Lou.
This is an anniversary. It's the 2nd week to the day of the Trump presidency. I mean, can you believe it's only been 2 weeks? Seriously.
No, I mean, he has been full throttle from the moment he put his hand on the Bible. This guy it's really been shock and awe. And I think one of the things the media has seen is that they can't keep up with him. In fact, I tweeted today that they're still playing checkers and he's playing chess, and he's working so far out in front of them that they just can't stand it. But it's amazing what he has pushed forward to do in just 2 short weeks.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's clear that the Trump White House is doing something that previous administrations, at least the last 2, or perhaps I think we can include most of the third, that is the Clinton administration, they did not work that far ahead. I mean, it's clear that President Trump has people laying things out days and days in advance and are moving strategically here. There's no accident to the fact that this is moving at this tempo.
Well, and one of the things, Lou, that we're seeing is this is what happens when an executive who is used to getting things done collides with the government, which typically says, let's slow walk everything because we need to justify all the people we have working here. This is a guy who immediately went in and floored the doggone accelerator, and he hasn't let up on it yet. And I think a lot of Americans are saying, bravo, he's doing exactly what he said he would do. How unusual and how refreshing it is for a politician to do that.
And the mood of the country is, the national liberal media is getting downright, I mean, they're getting increasingly vicious. At the same time, we're seeing every sign, whether we look at markets, whether we look at surveys, the American people are responding to the prospect of what this man is going to get done, and they've done so since November 8th.
There's so much excitement out in the country because even people that didn't vote for Trump are having to say to themselves, you know what, this guy's really taking this job seriously. He came to work with his, lunch pail and his hard hat. And thank God we finally have somebody who's paying attention to the things that matter, like jobs and a regulatory environment that's been strangling businesses and causing people not to be able to get a job. It is a new day because there's a new sheriff in town, and the media hate it. They can't stand it. And what they really don't get is that the American people have pretty much just dismissed them out of hand and no longer are paying attention to them.
And a lot of people are not paying attention to the national liberal media and what is going on. We're watching corporation after corporation attack this president's executive orders, attack his policies, and they're doing it as individual CEOs of individual companies, not waiting for the Chamber of Commerce or the Business Roundtable, perhaps because they think those lobbyists probably would look a little bad here putting forth their case right now. But we are watching the corporate masters of the national left-wing media, whether it's the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos, whether it's the New York Times and Carlos Slim, whether it is CBS News, whomever it might be. Their corporate masters are giving the go-ahead to go left, go hard against this president.
Well, Lou, the New York Times, I call it the New York Slimes. They used to be the paper of record, but they've become the paper of broken record, saying the same things over and over again, and it's so tiresome that, again, I just think that they have marginalized themselves out of any sense of credibility, and only the far left are taking them seriously and treating them as a legitimate news source to get objective and fair reporting. Most people have said, forget about it.
That trust proving to be quite fungible. Governor, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Mike Huckabee.
You too, Lou. Thank you.
We want to give a special shout out tonight to a special fan of Lou Dobbs tonight. The young lady is Mila McDaniel of North Carolina. She's 8 years old. She loves politics. She watches Lou Dobbs tonight regularly. And I want to wish her sister Rowan a happy birthday, because her birthday was 2 weeks ago and because she had to share her birthday on January 20th with President Trump on his inauguration day. Her sister, Mila, preferred to call the day Trump Day rather than Rowan's Day, because obviously Mila is also a big fan of President Trump. We wish you the very best. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend. I hope your team wins, as long as it's my team. Good night from New York.